What's the worst house guest experience you've had? Story 1. A former friend of ours called us and said that her house caught on fire, so naturally we offered her a safe place to stay while she was dealing with the aftermath. We went and picked her up, brought her home, and got her set up for the night. The next day, she grabbed what she could from her apartment and brought it over to our house. My wife washed all of her clothes, which, by the way, smelled exactly as you would expect after being in a house fire. Unfortunately, that scent is very hard to get out. So our house smelled of smoke for a long time as my wife was washing the clothes multiple times. Eventually, we realized she was not trying at all to get her life back in order. She also was not helping at all in our house or making an effort to get her things together. She apparently just decided that she was going to stay with us and coast. Ultimately, she started being really critical of anything we did, tried to start drama, and was generally unpleasant to be around. What finally broke the camel's back was that I returned one day to find her and someone we had never met before smoking on our front porch. It was not really a big deal, but it was odd that she did not let us know that she was inviting anyone into our home. The next day I went to take my medication that I had just filled and noticed that there were only 5 pills left from the prescription. She and her friend had helped themselves to my medicine. After that, she announced that she was going to stay somewhere that she was welcome and that we could throw away the clothes and items we had at our house because she did not want them anymore since they smelled too much like smoke. The best part came after she moved out, when we read a story in the newspaper about the cause of the fire. She had caused it herself by smoking on the back deck of her apartment and carelessly not putting the cigarette out. We never really saw her again. She tried to make contact, but we avoided her. She ended up moving in with some of our other friends whom we had tried to warn, and she almost accidentally hurt their dog due to carelessness before being kicked out by them. Story 2. A friend I had not seen in about a year called me last weekend wanting to catch up, so he came over. I did not realize he was completely drunk until he walked in, and I was not sure how to defuse the situation. It started with him using my bathroom, and instead of flushing, he just put both seats down. Then he went into my fridge to grab a craft beer that I had been saving for a rainy day and drank it. Out of nowhere, he started saying offensive words that I had never heard him say before. At this point, I told him to either calm down or leave, but I also did not want him to drive because he lived about an hour away. He then said he was going to go get cigarettes, so I offered to drive him. As soon as we were down the road, he yelled at me to pull over because he had to use the bathroom. And when I told him to wait a few minutes, he made a complete mess inside the car. By this time, I was livid, and when he grabbed my arm to apologize, his hand was soaked, and he basically wiped it all over me. I knew I was going to lose my temper if I did not get to the gas station, so once I got there, I told him to go inside. When he went in, I drove off and called his girlfriend, telling her she needed to pick him up from that gas station. I went home, took a shower, and about an hour later, his girlfriend called me and said he was in the back seat of a police car because he had called emergency services asking for substances. Needless to say, that was the last time I ever saw him. Story 3. I was 23 when I signed a lease for a duplex with my girlfriend. We got new furniture and a new computer. Then my brother showed up with a broken foot and said he could not work, so he stayed with me. He acted grateful, and I had a spare bedroom that I was using as an office. My new computer was in that room. He downloaded so much adult content that it crashed the hard drive. I had to wipe it and reinstall the system. After that, I put a parental block on the computer. He finally got a job but spent almost all his money on substances. When I asked him to contribute to food or bills, he would claim he had already given me $500 the week before. In reality, I think I got about $100 from him in the 6 months he was there. One day he got so messed up on pills that he pissed out and ruined my brand new couch. When I yelled at him and told him he had to pay for the cleaning, he tried to fight me. That was when I told him to get out, and it turned into a nightmare. He sent threatening messages saying he was going to hurt me. The police were called, they took statements and wrote down the text messages, but nothing really happened at the time. About 3 months later, they finally arrested him, and then our mother called me saying it was all my fault and that I needed to drop the charges. Needless to say, I am not very close with my family these days. On top of that, the bed in the office was totally ruined after he stayed there. I found a duffel bag full of inappropriate magazines and a few dozen little baggies with substance residue. Story 4. I lived in a 2-unit house, and we were in the back unit that connected to a shared garage. The garage was used for nothing other than laundry and storage, and a previous tenant had left a mattress in it that no one ever bothered to move. One day I went into the garage and nearly jumped out of my skin upon seeing a man sleeping on the mattress. I freaked out and ran back to my unit just as two of my male housemates were coming home. They went to confront the man and came back to tell me that he was friends with our other male housemate, who had told him he could crash in the garage because he was between leases for a few days without informing the rest of us. Despite this inconsiderate move by my roommate, I offered to let the man sleep on my living room couch instead of some old mattress in the crummy garage. A few days turned into a few weeks and then months. Since I was the administrator of our utilities and rent payments, I demanded that he contribute at this point. He agreed, but I was moving out soon because I had finished my studies early. The couch and Wi-Fi router were mine, and I was leaving them behind to pick up at the end of the year as a favor to my housemates. He shorted me a few $100s, which was a lot to a broke college student. Another housemate ended up paying his share because I was ready to go back and reclaim my couch and router. A year later, the same man had the audacity to text me and ask if he could take me out the next time I came into town. Story 5. My brother Todd is a substance addict and an alcoholic. Before mom and dad finally had enough and got a restraining order, since they kept thinking that if they kept him at home he would get sober, he would wander the streets and bring home homeless people who were also strung out in the middle of the night. One time it was a woman who used our bathroom, taking a shower and leaving an absolute mess, including her soiled underwear on the bathroom floor. She also stole some things. We did not know about her until the morning when she left my brother's room because despite being extremely high, she was quiet. And for once, my brother, despite being intoxicated himself, remembered the alarm code, which was unusual because he normally forgot it when he was drunk. Most of the time, we would catch him bringing home strange women and men to sleep in his room because the alarm would go off and wake us all up. Every time, Dad would throw them both out and change the garage door code for the night so my brother could not get back in. Another time, one of my mom's now former friends came over in a rage, forcing her way in. She had been at urgent care and got tired of waiting. She had a bladder infection that was so bad she was bleeding. She left the bathroom a bloody mess and screamed at Mom the entire time before finally leaving. Mom cut her out of her life after that. Story 6. So my paternal aunt came to visit my father, who was in hospital. She got off the bus with her husband, went to see him for an hour, then stayed at our home for a week and never went to see him again. Both of them, she and her husband, would not do anything to help me or my mom. My mom had to take care of everything, prepare food for them, then go visit my father, come back and cook again for them. They took over our living room and would spend all day watching television without interacting with others, leaving lights and fans on and doors open everywhere they went. Her husband used every item in the bathroom and made a mess of everything, using the soap, the razor, the trimmer, and even my toothbrush. After a week of this free vacation, they demanded I drop them off at the bus station. I was very sick myself at that time, and we did not own a car, so I had to drop them off one by one at the station on my bike. I had 104 degrees Fahrenheit fever from a stomach infection, and that day was terrible for me. If I had owned a car back then, I definitely would have had to drive them to their home 160 kilometers away for free. Story 7. My parents hosted a guy from another state who played on the same sports team as my brother for a year, and he was the same age as me. He basically stayed in his room the whole time he was not at school or practice. The door was always closed, and he would not let anyone in to clean, not even to vacuum, for the entire year. An important detail is that this guy had allergies or something, even though we did not have pets or use scented candles that could have triggered them. He was constantly sniffing and clearing his throat. My family thought he was using tissues while in his room. That was not the case. There was a giant, disgusting pile of spit along with other fluids all over the carpet and walls. The room had to be professionally cleaned after he left because of how gross it was. Early in the year, a picture of myself and a friend went missing from my room. I thought the friend had taken it last time she was over because it was a cute picture of us. It was later found in a drawer in his room, also covered in those same fluids. It still disgusts me to think about it. Story 8. My roommate started seeing a guy who did not have a car and lived in the town over, about a 20-minute drive away. She would pick him up from his house and bring him to ours, but she did not always want to drive him home the next morning because she would have to work early. This quickly turned into him staying at our apartment full-time, despite protests from my second roommate and me. After about 2 weeks, I noticed over $100 missing from my wallet. He and I were the only two in the apartment all day. My wallet had been in my bedroom while I was watching television in the living room. He had been locked away in her room all day, but since I could not see down the hall that led to the bedrooms, it was easy to figure out that he had snuck down the hall and gotten into my wallet. Still, she refused to believe me. I kept my bedroom door locked for a while and kept my valuables inside until I was able to get a camera set up. Then I left my door unlocked one day with a small amount of cash in my wallet in front of the camera to lure him. It worked perfectly, and I caught him on camera stealing from me again. Showing them the video finally got my roommate to believe me, but he still tried to deny it. He was dumped and kicked out, but I lost about $150 that I never got back. Story 9. A woman I met on a dating site drove from South Carolina to Ohio to stay at my place for Labor Day weekend. She seemed normal at first until I noticed strange behavior. Every time she used the bathroom, which was twice a day, she went through an entire roll of toilet paper. She literally used up all the toilet paper I had. The first night, she just stared at me, repeating over and over that I was gorgeous, even though I am average looking, and told me everything she wanted to do to me. Finally, just to stop her talking, I initiated intimacy. As I was about to begin, she looked me straight in the eyes and said in a gravelly voice that if I put anything in her in a certain way, she would literally kill me. We did not go through with it. She then asked me to give her advanced warning before bedtime. When I asked why, she revealed that she was bipolar and would never sleep if she did not take her medication an hour before bed. It did not matter because I woke up alone, hoping she had left. Instead, she later told me she had stood naked in front of the living room window all night, sobbing. I live on the second floor right in front of a sidewalk. My poor neighbors. The second day was me trying to avoid her in my own apartment and posting updates online during her 2-hour-long bathroom trips. I eventually asked her to leave that afternoon and she did, but when she got back to South Carolina, she emailed me, asking if we had not been intimate all weekend because I was secretly gay. I assured her I was not, but explained that I do not usually prefer being threatened while trying to be with someone. I also added that after seeing how much toilet paper she went through, no one would want to be anywhere near her in that way. Her final email reply said she respected me for being brutally honest. Story 10. My cousin was staying at my house about 6 years ago when I was 22 and she was around 30. We already did not get along, but since she had a good relationship with my dad, he let her stay despite my objections. The problem was that my parents had to leave for a nearby town, 2 hours away because of an emergency. That night I went out with friends, and when I returned home with food, I found my cousin completely intoxicated. I knew she had alcohol problems, but this was more than that. She looked out of her mind. I told her I needed something from the guest room where she was staying, as an excuse to check what she had been taking. She told me I was not allowed in the room. I reminded her that it was my house and I did not need her consent. She started hitting me when I tried to open the door. I pushed her away and called my parents. She was screaming, hitting, and kicking me, and I knew if I fought back she would accuse me of assault. I locked myself in my room, and then I heard it. She had grabbed a knife and was stabbing at the door like a scene out of a horror movie. My dad called her mom, who eventually came over, dragged her out of the house, and got her into a car. It turned out she had taken about 5 different pills on top of drinking heavily. I had to go to the hospital because she kicked me hard and I was worried about the swelling. She is no longer allowed at my house. Story 11. I was living in a tiny 9-square-meter student apartment when my best friend transferred to my university. There was a 1-week difference between when his classes started and when his apartment would be ready, so I invited him to stay with me on a roll-out mattress on the floor. I did not realize it would be the beginning of the end of our friendship. He showed his appreciation by buying me groceries for the week, but in a very condescending way, making comments about how he needed better food than what I had. I admitted I was not prioritizing health or fitness at the time, so I let it slide. Then he started pointing out things that were not clean enough, like dust behind the toilet, and would ask me pointedly if I was going to clean it. He said that if he was going to be there for a week, it had to be to his standards. Since I did not have a kitchen sink in my unit, I used the bathroom sink to collect a few dishes before taking them to the communal kitchen, or sometimes I would wash a fork or spoon quickly in the bathroom sink if I needed it. One time he picked up a fork I had just put there, held it in front of my face, and asked if I was going to wash it immediately. I said no, and he sighed and washed it himself. Just one fork. By the end of the week, I was more than ready for him to leave and move into his own room. I decided never to extend that kind of offer again. Story 12. I had a friend who needed help, so he stayed with me. He was supposed to pay rent while he looked for a place of his own. It was meant to be temporary. I had to kick him out after just over a month. I charged him less than half of the rent, and he was responsible for his own food while I covered utilities. In those 5 weeks, he destroyed his room. The carpet was stained, there were scuff marks on the walls and cigarette burns, even though he was not supposed to smoke inside. I found his things scattered everywhere, including a pile of coins under the couch from adult shops. I did not enter his room for the first 4 weeks, but then a foul smell started coming from there. When I finally went in, I was horrified. I cleaned out 3 bags of pure garbage, coffee cups, cigarette butts, and trash piled all over the floor. The carpet was not even visible. The worst part was the food. I had 4 packs of bread in the freezer that would have lasted me about 3 months. He ate 2 of them in 1 week, just stuffing bread into his mouth like potato chips. It was disgusting. When I asked him to leave, I swore I would never let anyone stay with me for more than a few days again. Story 13. I had a friend from college visiting for the weekend. On Sunday night, when he was supposed to drive back to his place, he had too much to drink. It was in the middle of a brutally cold winter, and the roads were already dangerous from the weather. Not wanting him to drive intoxicated, I offered to let him stay another night, pointing out that the roads might be better in the morning. He thought about it and agreed. After another round of drinks and some smoking, we both went to bed around 10:30. At 1 in the morning, I woke up drenched in sweat. The heat was on full blast. When I got up to turn the temperature down, I noticed the front door wide open, porch and hall lights shining as if advertising my place to anyone passing by. He was gone, and so was all of my beer and supplies. My calls went straight to voicemail. I saw him once or twice afterward, and he acted as if nothing had happened. Maybe he blacked out and forgot, but regardless, I never let that happen again. Story 14. I had a group of friends, 2 women and 3 men, including myself, and we would hang out in my apartment, play drinking games, paint, and just relax. My best friend was talking to a girl, and she and a friend wanted to hang out if he picked them up after work. We agreed, so we went to get them. We ended up at a shady-looking building, and it turned out they were dancers. No disrespect to that profession, but these 2 were obnoxious, constantly on their phones, and only interested in being spoiled. I was already uncomfortable in the car ride back to my place. They acted as if they were heading to some celebrity's party, even though we lived in Oklahoma, and they had just finished working in a part of town that even locals made fun of. When we arrived, the atmosphere became tense. They were rude, barely spoke to anyone except my friend, kept going straight for our drinks, and stayed glued to their phones while complaining about other places they could be. We tried to get them to play a game with us, but they barely participated, tossing the ball without care and going back to their phones while someone else retrieved it. After only 2 turns, we gave up. Later, the 4 of us sat on the couch while our other 3 friends had gone outside. The women complained again that they could be at a hotel partying. My friend asked, "This place isn't better than a hotel?" One of them made a condescending snort that was the final straw for me. Maybe it was the buildup of everything, but I was not going to let them show up, act rudely, and then insult my home. I looked at my friend, paused, and then broke the silence by saying, "Okay then, you both need to leave." They looked shocked and insulted at first, but quickly gathered their things and left with my friend. I doubt they cared much. The other 3 friends came back in, admitted they had gone outside because the whole thing was too awkward, and we laughed about it being the first time anyone had made me angry enough to throw them out. Story 15. A friend of mine stayed over at my place from across the country to look at colleges. The first night she arrived, she confessed that she was in love with me. It was not mutual, as I was happily in a relationship. I was understandably upset and went to my girlfriend's place. About 30 minutes later, I got a text from my friend saying she planned to end her life in my room and blame me. I rushed home, stopped her, and took the knife she had already slightly used. For the rest of her stay, I lied to her, pretending I had feelings for her just to keep her calm. I realized then she was completely unstable, and I had been blind to it for years. I kept up the charade until she left, then told her never to contact me again and completely cut her off. I still feel terrible about the whole situation, and the fact that I held her hand at one point makes me feel sick. It felt like cheating, even though I was just trying to prevent her from losing control. Not to sound dramatic, but I still wake up in a cold sweat sometimes, thinking about how ruined my life could have been if I had not rushed back. If my phone had been on silent, I could have been blamed for something I did not do, with no way to explain it. I think about it every single day. Story 16. My sister has always made terrible decisions, but this time she outdid herself. She asked if she could come from Texas to Iowa for a few weeks, a month at most. I live with my mother because both of our parents needed care. Our father had advanced cancer, and our mother was dealing with the onset of dementia. I pleaded with my mom to refuse, but my sister never asked properly. She only hinted at showing up, and 4 days later, she moved in with her 5-year-old son. We suddenly had 4 people in a 2-bedroom house. She took over my mother's room and forced her into a back room with no heating in the dead of winter. She refused to pay bills or help with chores. She applied for food assistance, put our names on it without permission, and then fought with us when we asked her to use it for the household instead of just herself. She got her medication at the start of each month, which was the only time she suddenly had narcolepsy until she ran out and demanded rides to the hospital to get more. That was just the beginning. I caught her stealing jewelry. She barely cared for her son, and she treated our mom terribly, blaming her for all her problems. This went on for 18 months before I finally had enough. I called the police, put her belongings on the curb so she could not take anything that was not hers, handed her $500 for the trip back south, and told her never to return. Story 17. I had to go to Nevada to see my mother in the hospital, and the only place to stay was at my sister's home. I stayed there for 4 days, and it was awful. The first time I went into the bathroom and lifted the lid, cockroaches crawled out of the toilet. I screamed because I had never been near cockroaches before. They were crawling on the walls and all over the house. I could not relax or sleep, constantly imagining them crawling over me. It was summer, about 100 degrees outside, but the air conditioning kept shutting off, so the inside was stifling hot. My nephew had a 5-year-old son named Ryden, who was the most badly behaved child I had ever met. He would not answer when spoken to, constantly jumped on the furniture and tables, and ignored every instruction. I put him in timeout around 10 times a day, but nothing worked. I had never disliked a child before, but I could not stand him. To make matters worse, their freezer was broken, and everything inside had thawed. I told them to call the landlord, but instead they bought a new refrigerator the next day. That was the only problem they fixed. Those 4 days were a completely traumatic experience for me. Story 18. A childhood friend of mine named Amy, who had lived across the street, asked to come visit with her new boyfriend Jay and their daughter Ruby. They lived about 5 hours away in the southern part of the state. When they arrived, they unloaded dirty clothes and toys everywhere. Ruby ran wild, touching everything, chasing the cat, and screaming whenever she was told no. Amy and Jay spoiled her every time she threw a fit. They even left her with me without asking, and I would only realize it when she screamed by my bed or when they were gone for the day without telling me. One time they went to the lake and did not answer my calls while Ruby screamed all day. When they returned, Amy brushed off my anger, saying since I had raised 2 kids, I should know how to handle it. I took Ruby to the park, the water toys, and even the playland at a fast food restaurant, but she was aggressive and constantly threw tantrums. Amy pretended to help with cleaning, but only made things worse, breaking dishes, breaking the vacuum, and leaving dirty diapers everywhere, even in the yard. They left trash, dirty clothes, and bags from stores scattered around. They started asking me to buy their groceries, diapers, and even alcohol. After a couple of weeks, I was completely drained. When I asked their plan, Amy said they would get a hotel, but they admitted later they had no money. This was absurd because they both collected unemployment, almost $900 a week between them. I finally called her parents and explained everything. They got Amy a hotel, and the family left after staying 5 weeks. They left their bedding filthy, trash everywhere, toys clogging my toilets, and even broke the screen door and damaged walls. It took me over a week to clean and repair everything. As they left, Jay had the nerve to say I was a poor host. Story 19. My ex was the type of person who, since our house was close to a large city, would offer to let all his friends stay with us if they came in from out of town. We had lived in a number of small towns throughout our marriage, and he had accumulated a massive number of friends. During the summer, it practically felt like I was living in a hotel because one set of friends would leave and the next set would show up. He had to be Mr. Hospitality, and no one ever offered anything in return. We spent a fortune on food and drinks. I hated it but was too naive at the time to leave. And even though I asked him repeatedly not to invite anyone else, he did not care. By the time this particular set of house guests arrived, I was already worn out from working full-time, cooking huge meals and cleaning up after everyone, while my ex did nothing but act personable and drink beer. This couple and their 4 kids showed up, and the children tore through the house like a tornado, screaming, which set me on edge immediately. The youngest ran to the basement and urinated all over the sofa in the rec room. She was around 6 or 7, definitely old enough to know better. After I cleaned up and asked her mother to show her where the bathroom was, the girl went into a spare bedroom and smeared feces on the wall. Her mother ignored it and walked away when I told her to clean it. One of the boys, about 8 or 9, began screaming hysterically because there was a cat hair on his bed. Not a pile, but a single hair, and he was having a complete meltdown, even though they had 3 cats of their own. The oldest went outside, picked up a stick, and chased our dog, trying to hit her. When she growled, he started crying, then ran into the house, crashed into a table, and broke a brand new lamp. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen trying to cook a full roast dinner with vegetables, gravy, Yorkshire pudding, and mushrooms. Their mother became the kitchen police, criticizing every single thing I cooked, telling me my gravy was wrong, the pudding was wrong, the mushrooms were wrong. She picked apart everything I did. I lost my patience. These people were staying for free and eating a huge meal they did not prepare or pay for, yet she was insulting me. I told her if she had such a problem, she could pay for hotel rooms for her whole family and complain to staff there, since they would be paid to listen. My ex got mad at me for blowing up, and I told him they could leave or I would. I got a hotel room that weekend and left him to deal with the chaos. After that, he never let them stay again, once he realized how much work it actually was. It has been over 10 years since I left him, and now I live in a place with no extra room for guests, and it has been bliss. Story 20. I had a friend named Tyree who used to stop by after middle school on his bike with some of our other friends. I told them they could come by anytime, but I did not expect him to take that as permission to walk into my house uninvited. One time he came in, poured a large cup of milk, drank half of it, and left the rest on the counter with the front door wide open. I lived in what was considered the projects, so this was especially reckless. I did not get too mad at first, but his careless behavior escalated. Once, while we were all in the kitchen, he started a food fight with himself, flinging strawberry yogurt all over the walls. I told him to clean it up and leave. Another time, when I had my girlfriend over, we were in my room when I heard the door open. He came upstairs, used my toilet, clogged it badly, and then tried to hang out with us. My girlfriend came in to tell me the toilet was overflowing, and he was just standing there smiling. I told him to unclog it however he could, and he used his bare hands, then washed them in my sink. That was the last straw. I kicked him out and only saw him at school or the park after that. Later, he ended up sucker punching a middle school science teacher who weighed barely 100 pounds, and the teacher needed surgery. Tyree was sent to juvenile detention for 2 years. I have not heard from him in about 15 years since. Story 21. This is going to get buried, but I need to get it off my chest. I invited a close friend from out of state to stay at my new boyfriend's house during South by Southwest. We had talked about hanging out and going to a specific concert together, and she even sent me lots of videos of the band to get me more interested. At the time, she was one of my best friends and the most popular girl in our larger group. My boyfriend had not lived in his house very long, so I put effort and money into making the guest room livable for her. She asked if she could bring a friend I knew, then another I did not know, then another mutual friend. I agreed, but suddenly there were about 6 girls in one bedroom and one guy in another, all from out of state. My boyfriend and I only expected 2 on the first night, and when those 2 left, he went to put pillows in the room and was shocked to find a group of people already sleeping there. That was how we found out. I was immediately embarrassed and had to explain to my boyfriend that I had not known they would all be there. Their first day, I drove them to the train station so they could do things without me. No problem. Then the day of the concert arrived, and after 18 hours of no response from my friend, she suddenly texted me saying they could not figure out how to work the shower. My boyfriend helped, and I thought communication had opened, so I asked about picking up a mutual friend from the airport. No reply. Later, I realized that friend was already in the guest room. All day I got nothing, and eventually it became clear I had been excluded from the concert. The whole reason for her visit was supposedly to go with me, but no one told me anything about when or where to meet, or that I did not need to pick up the airport friend. Someone else in the group eventually asked where I was, and I told them I was not coming. By then it was too late to get ready, and I had work, so I decided I was done rearranging my life for them. That night they all went out to a bar, and my friend got drunk and cried about how mean I was for being upset. She even had her friends text me about it. I thought she should have talked to me directly. Later she sent me long messages blaming another friend for everything, though she gave no real explanation. I did not fight, I just said I had no time. It felt like she wanted me to be grateful for whatever scraps of time she offered and to apologize publicly for missing the concert, even though it was her fault. One of her friends at least acknowledged how badly they treated me and offered a spa day, but I declined. I stopped engaging, and they eventually got a hotel. I never saw her again after dropping her at the train station. After she flew back home, I asked her directly if she thought I had wronged her somehow, but she never responded. Instead, she trashed me to people we both knew in my city and to our mutual friends in California. Months later, I ran into an old friend who gave me the cold shoulder, and I realized she had poisoned them against me too. I lost many friends that way. The ones who remained were mostly people who had also been treated badly by her before. This all happened in 2016, and it still hurts. I am fine with losing someone so toxic, but she did not have to destroy my reputation with everyone we both knew. Story 22. I used to be friends with a guy named Dave. He was like a modern-day wandering musician. He would go home, do odd jobs to save enough money for a plane ticket, and then spend as long as he could traveling, playing music in the streets for pocket money, and crashing on couches or camping in the woods until he was completely broke. Then he would find a way back home. In reality, he usually just stayed somewhere till he wore out his welcome. I met him through friends, and every time he came into town, we hung out, but I always made it clear he could not stay on my couch. One time he showed up during a stretch of cold and rainy weather, and since he had nowhere to go, I told him he could stay just a couple of days. He ended up staying for about 2 weeks, making a mess, eating my food, and contributing nothing. One night I finally told him it had to be his last night, and he agreed. We stayed up late drinking and talking about where he would go next, and for a while I almost forgot how annoying he had been those 2 weeks. He told me he would be gone in the morning. When I woke up, he was gone, and so was all of my stash. Story 23. Our friend stayed with us for a month, even though he originally said it would be less than 2 weeks. During that time, he lived on our couch in the living room. He never paid for any food unless he ordered from delivery services, and he never paid for alcohol. So we ended up spending about $300 on food and drinks for him over the month. This was during the early days of the pandemic, before vaccines, and we were very careful about who entered our home. That made it even worse when he went out to see people without masks while staying with us. One morning, after a night where he had hosted a party in our house, made a huge mess, broken glasses, and done nothing to clean up, he left without telling us to see more people. Eventually, it all came to a head when we agreed as a house that he could not be in our bubble anymore. Despite that, he went out to see someone, and of course, that person tested positive for COVID. Because of him, my housemates had to cancel vacation plans to see their families, and some who had already left had to deal with the fear that they might have exposed their loved ones. Story 24. I lived in a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment with my boyfriend. He begged me to let his best friend stay with us while he got on his feet after moving from several states away. My boyfriend explained that his friend had issues with anxiety and had been traumatized by a forced stay in a mental health ward as a teenager, but said he was otherwise harmless. For months he stayed with us, doing nothing, and then I learned about his disgusting rag. A few days after he moved in, I noticed a gross, smelly rag draped on the side of the tub. When I asked my boyfriend about it, he went red and stormed out, yelling at his friend about promises not to let this be an issue again. It turned out the guy used one single rag to wipe himself after using the bathroom. He refused to use soap, only rinsing it with hot water and wringing it out. Remembering the smell made me physically ill when my boyfriend explained it. I never saw the rag again, and I never asked what happened to it because I was scared of the answer. As disgusting as it was not dangerous, but the final straw came after months of him doing nothing but playing on our gaming systems. He even used my game pre-order codes while I was at work, which meant I lost access to exclusive gear from my favorite franchise. It might sound petty, but that was the last straw. On top of the smell, his lack of hygiene, and his refusal to cook, clean, or pay for anything. We had finally had enough and made him leave. Story 25. I had my mom take a DNA test because we suspected that her father was not actually her biological father. It turned out to be true. She got in touch with family members related to her biological father and discovered that she had a long-lost sister. My mom already had a sister who, for lack of a better word, is a leech. So we hoped this new sibling would be better. Unfortunately, she was just as bad, if not worse. My mom made plans to travel across the United States to finally meet her, and that meant she would be staying at our house. When she arrived, we immediately saw that her health was much worse than she had said, and she basically needed full-time care for everything. My parents suddenly became caregivers, having to help her constantly. She demanded attention around the clock, raided our pantry, and drained my parents' wallet. She knew about this trip for over a year since the pandemic had delayed it, yet she only saved up $125 to last an entire month. My mom is too kind and does not set boundaries, so she was constantly buying things for her sister. Within 10 minutes of meeting her, she realized she had forgotten her walker at the airport, which is 2 hours away from us. That meant a 4-hour round trip in traffic just to get it. She also could not use our shower because she had to sit while bathing, but she had never mentioned this. So my mom had to schedule salon appointments at a store every other day just to get her hair washed, and of course, my mom had to pay for it. Story 26. My partner and I took my daughter-in-law and granddaughter from England to Northern Ireland to stay with relatives for a few days. My partner did all of the driving except for the ferry, and my daughter-in-law did not even buy him a cup of tea, let alone contribute to fuel costs. There were 8 of us in the house. Either I or my sister-in-law cooked breakfast for everyone, but my daughter-in-law decided she could not wait one day and made cereal just for herself and her daughter without offering anything to the other 6 people. We planned a train trip to Belfast, and I said we needed to be ready early because the trains were not frequent. But since I said it, of course we ended up going in cars, and then she complained that we should have left earlier, even though we had all been waiting for her. On the day we had to leave for the ferry, I insisted we be ready by 7 in the morning, earlier than necessary, but it was the only way to make sure she would be on time. We barely made it. On the way back, we usually stop at a supermarket for milk and bread, but she wanted us to take her home first, which would have meant a long detour. We refused. She later said she had not enjoyed the holiday and was not impressed. Afterwards, she dropped many hints about wanting to go again, but we suddenly became deaf to them. Story 27. When I was growing up, my next-door neighbor was a kind, elderly man who lived alone. I was young at the time, so I do not remember every detail, but I know this much. He befriended a 30-year-old man he met at a bar, and when that man said he had lost his house, my neighbor agreed to let him and his family stay with him for a few months. Those few months turned into about 5 years. The family was awful. They were heavy smokers and drinkers, and I am fairly certain they used substances too, all while raising a 7-year-old daughter in that environment. They had a vicious dog that was never trained and that often got into our yard, terrifying my sister and me. The police were called to their house at least a dozen times. The worst part came when my neighbor passed away from cancer. In his will, he left the house to his daughter, who had just gotten married, rather than to the family living with him. That family had already been pressuring and harassing him to give them the house, so when they found out he had left it to his daughter, they were furious. They even tried to fight the will in court and asked my grandfather, who was a lawyer, to help them. When that failed, they harassed the daughter, demanding the house and refusing to leave. When they finally did go, they stole everything that was not bolted down and smashed everything else with hammers. Story 28. My wife had one of her childhood friends come visit for about a week several years ago. The trip was supposed to be to see her boyfriend, but about a month before the trip, she kissed another guy, told her boyfriend, and he broke up with her. She did not cancel her plane tickets. She flew into an airport over 2 hours away from our house and told my wife to pick her up and take her to someone else's house 45 minutes past where we lived. She stayed there for a day or two, then I had to pick her up from that house. She was fine when it was just the two of us. But when my wife came home, she immediately started ugly crying as soon as she walked in the door. When she calmed down, she would look at my wife while not talking and make whimpering noises like a spoiled child. Anytime we both left a room, she started loudly crying, so much that our downstairs neighbor texted me to make sure my wife was okay because he could hear it through his ceiling. She stayed for what felt like ages, and it never improved. When she finally left, my wife had to drive her 3 hours away, and she never once offered to pay for gas or for any of her meals. Story 29. A friend of a friend called me at about 11 at night, saying he was stranded and needed a ride to the next city. I had only met him a few times through another friend and did not know him well. Since my girlfriend and I had nothing else to do, and I would want help if I were stranded, I agreed. He sent me the address, and it turned out to be an hour and a half away. I was frustrated, but we drove there anyway. We waited about 20 minutes for him to come out, then started driving back. His conversation was scattered. He said he had broken up with his girlfriend a week earlier, had been in jail, and had not been back to his apartment. I figured maybe he was turning things around, but 3/4 of the way back, he admitted he had nowhere to stay. He asked if he could stay with us and promised to give us gas money the next day. I was hesitant but agreed. Back at my apartment, we hung out until about 2 in the morning. Before bed, I told him he could help himself to food, but to clean up after himself. The next morning, I woke up to coffee spilled on the counter, ink from a pen on the table, and him cutting lines of substances on my table with the blinds wide open. I told him to close them because I was worried neighbors would see and call the police. He apologized, said the ink was an accident, and even offered me some substances, but I was only concerned about the money he promised. He acted like he forgot, so I told him we should go to the bank. He grabbed some of his things, left others behind, and got into my car. Instead of the bank, he directed me to a bowling alley. As we neared it, he admitted he did not have the money and was going to gamble on bowling games to win it. He had some cash, but not all he owed. At that point, I no longer cared. He got out and told me to pick him up later. I said maybe, drove home, blocked his number, and never spoke to him again. He had left his bowling equipment in my apartment, so I sold it. Was it morally right? Probably not, but it got me the money he promised me. Story 30. I rented a house on a house-sharing website for me and my 11 friends for our annual fantasy football draft. The first night, 4 of us were there. We hung out, went out drinking, and came back to the house like we had done so many times before. We went to bed around midnight and were woken up at 3 in the morning by police breaking in the front door, guns drawn, and cuffing me and 2 of my friends. They did not tell us what was happening, and we did not see our 4th friend during their questioning. We kept asking what was going on, but they said nothing for hours. One of my friends refused to talk and kept saying what they were doing was illegal. The other guy and I answered their questions. Eventually, they told us that our 4th friend had called emergency services from the convenience store down the street, claiming that someone in the house was trying to kidnap and torture him. When the police found him, he was shirtless, shoeless, and trying to flag down cars on a busy street. They cuffed him and took him to the hospital. After about 3 hours of questioning, they finally uncuffed us. Before leaving, they mentioned the water was running in the master bathroom. We went in to find the room destroyed, the mirror broken, window shattered, toilet destroyed, and water flooding into the master bedroom. My 2 friends suggested we not tell the homeowner and try to fix it ourselves so we could still have our weekend. I could not do it and called the homeowner, who was furious and immediately kicked us out. At that point, I was more concerned about finding my friend and making sure he was okay. I called hospitals, jails, and hotels, but no one gave information. One of my friends had to pretend to be his brother to get details, and the hospital only confirmed they had released him at a certain time. Finally, a bail bondsman told us he was in jail. When I picked him up and asked if he remembered anything, he said no. After I showed him the pictures, he broke down and cried. The worst part was that, since I rented the house, I had to deal with a furious homeowner threatening to sue me unless I did certain things. It was brutal. Eventually, I got my friend to pay him around $5,000 plus the $1,500 from the insurance that luckily came through. Story 31. My parents were going through a rough patch when an old friend of theirs needed a place to stay. We cared about him, so my mom gave up her own bed and room for him. He turned out to be a disgusting person who would not clean his bathroom or bedroom and would eat all the food in sight. My dad was spineless and allowed him to eat everything we had. Every paycheck of mine went straight to his stomach. He even started causing problems between my parents, getting into shouting matches with my mom after she did his laundry, cooked for him, and cleaned his room. The three of them worked together in the family business, but he did nothing and still got paid, which eventually forced my mom to quit. When we tried to leave, my dad would not let us use the family car to look for a place to rent, and they even shut off the electricity when we stopped cooking and shopping for them. We finally left after he asked me, at 18 years old, inappropriate soul questions. My mom decided we were better off homeless than staying in a situation full of harassment, gaslighting, and financial abuse. His mother also visited once and said racist things about people like us. Before we left, he locked the room so we could not take my mom's bed. The funny part is that 2 years later, they were evicted for not paying rent, and our old landlord actually called to ask if we wanted to live there again. Sometimes life is awful, but sometimes it delivers perfect karma. Story 32. An old flame from college reached out to me and asked to meet up. We had a brief fling back then, and she ended things because she had heard I was a playboy. I invited her over to my condo and cooked dinner. Over dinner, she told me that her parents saw her as a failure with a drinking problem and that she did not really have a place to live. This once very attractive woman had lost 20 pounds and looked like she had not bathed in days. She told me that doctors had warned her if she did not stop drinking, she would die, and then she proceeded to drink 4 or 5 beers. She used my shower, and afterward, we snuggled and watched a movie. She said she wanted to be intimate, but I refused and told her I was not interested in a relationship. She ended up staying for 4 days, and it was extremely uncomfortable. She drank heavily the entire time. I slept on the couch while she stayed in my bed. She acted as if being invited over meant she could automatically stay the night. I felt guilty, like I was leading her on, because in the evenings I would hold her while we watched television. I did not know what else to do. It seemed like she needed affection without being taken advantage of. She admitted she had been with over 40 men since college, sometimes as payment for rent. She is still alive today, married, and has a child. I hope she is in a better place mentally. I later learned that a man she dated in college abused her violently, and I think she was still trying to recover when she stayed with me. No one deserves that. I still wonder if what I did was the right thing. Story 33. My partner had a friend stay over for a while because she was in between apartments. We expected her to stay for about 2 weeks, but the warning signs started immediately. First, she begged to bring her 4 cats into my home. I already had 3 cats and a dog in a tiny apartment, and she had another place for her cats to stay, but she insisted. She then started leaving a space heater on 24 hours a day, claiming it was energy efficient, but it ran our electricity bill sky high. She smoked, which I tolerated, but one morning she lost a half-smoked blunt in the apartment, and the smell was so strong it woke me up. She left rolling tobacco on the coffee table. My cat ingested some, and I had to take him to the vet after he vomited repeatedly. She smoked cigarettes on the porch and tossed the butts into the yard. When the snow melted, we discovered hundreds of cigarette butts scattered outside. She once bought a case of beer, and I moved it to the beverage fridge to make space in the main one. She thought I had thrown it out, slammed doors, screamed, and broke the fridge door in a rage. I came home early from work one day to find her in the shower, blasting sad music and screaming at the top of her lungs so loudly that neighbors complained, thinking someone was being murdered. The final straw came when she suggested a threesome with my partner and me. I think she was trying to find another excuse to extend her stay, but it was disturbing. She was ruining my home, my relationship, and my peace of mind. And all of this happened in just 1 month. I will never host another guest for more than a single night. Story 34. This was back in middle school, but I still find it ridiculous to this day. After playing baseball at the park for a couple of hours, my two friends and I went back to my house to play games in the basement. After about an hour of playing Grand Theft Auto 4, one of my friends said, "It smells bad in here." I was immediately embarrassed because it was my house, so I figured my cat must have gone to the bathroom down there, and I had not seen it. My cat almost never went outside of her litter box, but it seemed like the only explanation. I turned on the lights and searched everywhere. After about 10 minutes, I gave up, but the smell was still strong. Eventually, the first friend started accusing my other friend of being the source of the smell. I did not want to believe it because it was not just body odor, it was a very distinct smell. The kid denied it immediately, but the other friend would not let it go and kept teasing him. Finally, when he had enough, he lifted the kid right off my couch, and it was obvious. There was a brown streak down the entire length of his shorts. He had completely gone to the bathroom in his pants, not just a small accident. It looked like something you would see in photos online of people under the influence who lost control. He lived just down the street, so we immediately sent him home and told him he could come back clean. He was too embarrassed and just stayed home while I cleaned my couch. To this day, I do not understand why he sat there for an hour pretending nothing was wrong. He had to literally be picked up off the couch before admitting he was lying. I have had accidents before, and it is always easier to admit it and take care of it quickly. Some people are just unbelievably gross. Story 35. A few years ago, I went with my husband to pick up an old church friend of his that I had never met. My husband had not seen him in years either. This was the night before I was supposed to start a new job. The man was having some problems and needed a place to stay for a couple of nights, but he ended up staying for about a week before we kicked him out. He ate almost all of my food in a rude and obsessive way, even though he had food stamps and could have paid for his own. He ate all of the mushrooms I had been saving for a nice day outside. He smoked a lot of our weed, which was fine in itself, but he smoked it out of empty beer cans that he left all over the table. He was filthy. My house is spotless almost all the time, so this was hard for me to tolerate. He took only one shower the entire time, and instead of drying off with a towel, he just shook himself off like a dog, leaving the bathroom wet. One time, my husband almost broke the door down because he suspected the man was doing substances inside. When we finally had enough, my husband brought him to the train station. On the way, he asked to stop at a dollar store. He went inside and stole something, and that was the last straw. We left him right there in the parking lot. Stealing from a dollar store was beyond pathetic. Since then, he has sent random packages to our house, expensive things too, without ever asking. Some have been here for years. Soon I am going to sell them because he has never come back. If he ever does show up to claim what he mailed, he is not allowed inside our home. Story 36. I had a little home on a cliff above a beach where I lived alone from May to mid-October every year. It was very rural, miles from the nearest town, with no electricity or phone signal. A close friend from home decided to visit for the weekend. On the day of her arrival, she turned up 7 hours late with no explanation. I had reserved a table at a restaurant in the nearest village so we could have dinner together, and the pub closed at 11 o'clock, but she did not arrive until well after midnight. She sulked because she missed the pub, so I cooked her a meal even though I had waited up. She ate and went to bed. The next morning, I got up at sunrise and went swimming in the sea, while she continued sleeping. Around 11 o'clock, I brought her a cup of tea, but she was still fast asleep. She finally got up around 6 in the evening and demanded dinner. I suggested the pub since she had missed it the day before, but she insisted I cook. The same thing happened the next day and the next. I ended up cooking 3 or 4 meals a day for a week while she barely left her room. She did not see the beach, the sea, or any of the local sights. She locked herself in, barely spoke to me, and acted like a sulking teenager rather than a 36-year-old woman. When I stopped cooking, she began sneaking into the kitchen at night, eating all of the food I had stocked for my 3-month stay, and using all the fuel. She did not shower for 2 weeks. On the third Saturday, she got up early and left without saying goodbye, leaving her room trashed. I had to pay for a taxi to get to the supermarket to replace my supplies since she never once offered to drive. When I returned home 2 months later, she showed up cheerful, acting as if nothing had happened. Soon after, I moved away without telling her where I had gone. I never saw her again. Story 37. Back in 2005, my younger sister, who was 16 years old at the time, came to stay with me and my husband for a few weeks in the summer. The plan was for her to help me with my twins. My husband was working 4 hours away during the week and stayed with my mom, coming home only on weekends. We were also preparing to move back to my hometown that summer. I was working at a local restaurant, and since I had a contract, I had to work through the summer. My sister watched my kids in the evenings while I worked down the street, and on weekends when I worked mornings. I paid her $100 a week, gave her an extra $20 in spending money, did all the chores for her, bought groceries including her favorites, and even set up prepaid tabs at restaurants so she could order food when she wanted. She ended up staying 4 weeks. During that time, she left used pads and tampons all over her room, with blood on the mattress and bedding. She stole all of my tip money, over $2,000, that I had been saving in a glass vase for a new apartment. She also used a debit card I did not even know I had, charging $680 for phone cards for her cell phone. When we moved, I discovered food stuffed in the air vents, trash in drawers, my missing clothes, and boxes filled with garbage, used toilet paper, substance paraphernalia, and even dirty diapers. She had literally packed trash and put it on the moving trailer. She ruined furniture, left the place smelling terrible, and denied all of it. None of us had any idea she was using substances, but it became clear. I was heartbroken about the money because she knew I was saving it to pay for our apartment and a new bed. She even left $1 bills around the rim of the vase to make it look full. To this day, I do not trust her at all. Substances destroyed my sister and left me with nothing but anger and betrayal. Story 38. A while ago, some friends came to town for family matters and needed a place to stay for the weekend. I offered my place since I had the space and figured we could hang out while they were in town. My buddy and his girlfriend arrived late on Friday night, after I had already gone to bed. I let them in, helped them set up, and went back to sleep since I had to work early the next day. On Saturday afternoon, when I came home from work, I noticed a burning smell. My friend explained that he had a sore neck and tried heating up a washcloth in the microwave to use as a heating pad, but it caught fire. I asked what he did with it, and he said he rinsed them out and put them on the back porch. Them? I asked. Sure enough, there were 3 or 4 charred rags on the porch, meaning he tried it multiple times. Later, they went to their family event and asked me to meet them at a bar afterward, though we had originally agreed on a relaxed night in. I declined, saying I would stay home. Around 3 in the morning, I got a call from an unfamiliar man who said he was outside helping my drunk friends. I went out to find my buddy, his girlfriend, 2 strangers, and all of them heavily intoxicated. We carried them inside, set up the girls on the pull-out bed, the random guy on the recliner, and my buddy crashed in my bed. At 5 in the morning, I felt him get up, assuming he was headed to the bathroom, but then I heard liquid streaming onto my carpet. He was urinating on the corner of my bedroom floor. I scrambled to stop him, directed him to the toilet, and then spent half an hour cleaning up my brand new carpet while he passed out on the floor. The next morning, I told him what happened and said he needed to properly clean it or reimburse me for a carpet cleaner. While I was at work, he bought cleaning supplies and texted me that he had taken care of it. I doubt he got it fully clean, but at that point, I let it go. One thing is certain, I will never let him drink at my house again.